IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to our All Things Policy podcast. On this episode, we have an interesting guest, also a friend of Takshashila. Shoba Narayan is a journalist, columnist, and an author. And today we're actually diving deep into her new book, Namma Bangalore, The Soul of a Metropolis. Though this might seem like a hyper-local conversation, we believe that smaller apartment complex to the country at large are a reflection of our society. And we'll get into the nuances of what makes the society. We talk about people, we talk about the markets, and we'll certainly talk about what the Sarkar has to do with it all. So welcome, Shoba, to this All Things Policy podcast.
Thank you so much, Sowmya. I think a friend of Takshashila is the most important thing in this conversation.
Shoba, just thinking, now it's not the weather that we boast about in Bangalore, where pensioners' paradise to, people cribbing about traffic. I thought traffic in Bangalore is the most spoken about, right? We joke around it. People write about it vehemently. There is rage. There is all sort of expressions to it. And I think your book, to some extent, also dwells into this topic. And I thought, I have a very different view about it. For me, the traffic or the time I spend driving, even from home to my workplace, has been an incredible me time space. Okay. And I don't get activated with, people cutting across and all of that. I found a nice way to endure this. And I sing, I listen to podcasts. I have a lot of fun just recording some voice messages, which I want to go back and dwell into later. So, what do you think in terms of cities having this kind of a texture? And you've seen different places, you've written about it. So I thought we should hear from you.
So, Sowmya, this is what you just said is very similar to what I say in the book. And it's in the chapter called Why is Bangalore the Startup Capital of India? And in it, I try to jokingly say it's because of our traffic jams, which if you learn to use them well, which is what you're doing, Sowmya, it can be great incubators of ideas. So, and in that chapter, I actually give you two ideas of how you can do this. And I say, for a change, just don't turn on your smartphone. Let your mind wander, look out at the traffic. You'll see strange and wonderful things. You'll get ideas from it. And this kind of resting time that the brain needs is actually necessary to connect the ideas, connect the dots of all the things that are simmering in your brain. So I say it partly in jest because when you're driving in traffic, and part of the reason I was late for this very particular podcast because of traffic. So when you're trying to get somewhere, when you're trying to meet someone, it's really irritating. But when you're well in time, when you have put in the cushion time that all of us Bangaloreans do, I think either if you're driving yourself or if you're going in an auto rickshaw, which is what I like to do, you can use that time to engage with yourself and the city in any way you like. So for me, engaging with the city happens when I'm usually in an auto rickshaw, which is the porous. The outside comes in. So, for example, at a traffic stop, a trans woman approached me, as they do with auto drivers. They'll come and tap you on the shoulder and say, "Ma duddu" or something. And I said, "Nimma hesarenu," and I got into a conversation with her. Of course, I did it because I know time is finite. Once the light changes, it will go. So you can engage with the city if you like. Or you can put up the window shield of your car and you can sing like you do, Sowmya, or listen to podcasts. Or you can do nothing and just let the ideas simmer in your head and see if anything comes out.
Yeah. Interestingly, what got me thinking is the specific mention of how Mumbai probably has a location-specific traffic and Delhi has more time-driven. And I think for Bangalore, it could be more weather-driven. The moment it pours, we know the next morning could be quite a batter, right? Like in terms of the
Correct.
time, it extends by further an hour or something like that, right? And
correct.
So I think that's...
Can I add one more thing, Sowmya, to this particular one? So you said pensioners paradise, we say garden city, but Bangalore also has another moniker which we call pub city. Recently, I was writing about the beer. Apparently, Bangalore has the highest number of craft breweries or microbreweries, if you want to call them, in the country, where we have nearly 100 microbreweries. So when I did the story, I went out and researched why. I visited about 15 of them. I spoke to the owners. I said, how is it so much in Bangalore? And they said, usually it is the same brand that has a branch in Kormangla, one in Hospete, one in near Orion Mall. And it's because of our traffic. We are forced to open multiple locations because breweries typically cater to a local crowd. And there, so to speak to your Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar, market forces have, which include traffic, have driven the opening of multiple microbreweries. And often the same guy is opening in many places because he's like, nobody is sitting in Whitefield and is going to come to my microbrewery here in Hebbal,
Right.
however good I am. So I have to open one.
Yeah.
So so the traffic is a cause of enterprise and and capital outflows.
Absolutely. I think the texture also of the city has moved, right? Like JP Nagar used to be a place that's the part of the city I live in, and it was never heard of in the ring road to have even restaurants, forget breweries. But now we have a lot of commercial activity thriving there, from cuisines from Cambodian to Italian and everything, a global mix of cuisine plus brewing. And I feel it also has an element of family people going here. Like you will see old women, you will see young children, everybody in the place having a good time. So it's a place where people just gather. Otherwise, there used to be a different mindset, right? It used to be, it's meant for youngsters. You should be super dressed differently of sorts. So that's out of the thing, at least in the South Bangalore kind of a culture that I see.
I 100% agree. In fact, one microbrewery I interviewed in JP Nagar said, on weekends we have multi-generational families where nobody drinks alcohol, but they come for the food. And because it's a welcoming atmosphere, nobody cares. You don't have to, as you say, dress a certain way. Bangalore is, see, one of the themes in my book, which I've gotten a lot of flack about, is that Bangalore is a very accepting and gentle city.
Yeah.
But I don't know any other city in India, Sowmya, where you can go to a microbrewery with full, take your mama, mommy, auntie, uncle, everybody, all dressed in saris and not wanting to drink, and then capture a table for 15 people and spend the afternoon there.
Yeah.
Just eating, not drinking.
Yeah. Also, I'm curious about how these cities make for new spaces, right? Like I know that towards the airport, in fact, one of my colleagues lives there where it's called New Indranagar. I'm like, are we like short of some interesting names that we have brought up this New Indranagar in it? But I realized that it's one of the oldest. Indranagar is an oldest location, but whereas Chickpet and Market area is probably the newer ones, right? But it just makes me think the complete contrast of it. So do you think that, these kinds of urban spaces coming up are, because there are certain kind of people in the market area doing wholesale business, that's why these things are thriving there. But Indranagar is more on the posh elite side, is what a local Bangalorean would think like. So I was a little surprised that how these things have come alive over time. Any
Yeah, and to your point about in Bangalore, it's exactly the opposite of whatever you think are new areas like Indranagar are in fact quite old, and whatever you think are these so-called old areas are new. It's exactly that point, I think. And Bangalore, because of its geographical location between three states, Telangana/Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, it has always been cosmopolitan. Where a father will speak Telugu, mother may speak Kannada, and the children will speak Tamil depending on the location. So one of the things that I got really, it used to irritate me was that when people keep saying Bangalore is the Silicon Valley of India, that is perhaps the newest layer of Bangalore. Before that, there were layers that incorporate the new Indranagar that you mentioned about, which is, it was a thriving bazaar economy where self-sufficient localities used to engage in trade, market. There were activists, and we have these inscription stones all over Bangalore that tell us about, the first citizen of Bangalore was in the Hebbala Veeragallu, or Hero Stone as it call it, where
Yeah.
there is a name given. So Hebbal, we all think new a flyover on the way to the new airport, but it is in fact one of the oldest areas in Bangalore. So I think the texture of the city, which is a lovely phrase that you used, Sowmya, is upside down. People will come in and they'll look at Indiranagar and say, okay, all the toilets are here, the 12th main is here with restaurants. This must be a trendy, hip area. Actually, it is older than. So that's one of the fascinating things about Bangalore's history and geography, actually.
Yeah, truly. I'm actually looking at the language tangent, right, which you talk about, Shoba. I think, of course, we are a welcoming city and people can actually, live here the longest and not pick up the language. But what we've also seen is there was a time when the dubbing industry went through a decade phase where the Kannada dubbing industry had a ban where none of the content could get dubbed. And that's the reason when my kids were growing up, we didn't have enough cartoon content which came in the Kannada language because we either consumed it in English or Hindi. So their familiarity with the language is much more there, and the textbooks actually have these words which we don't use in our conversational language. Like we wouldn't say vana or some of these things, whereas we say kadu in our conversational language, or we don't use jala, but we use niru kind of thing, right? So I feel a lot of children have kind of detracted from the whole thing of, oh, language is such a difficult one, right? And when we have conversations at home, they feel that is fun. But when you go back to reading Hale Kannada and things like that, it makes it very complex because the literature is quite on the heavier side there, where you need to understand there's a different way of, even the way it's pronounced is slightly different. So all of that add to, some sort of resistance, I feel. And like you rightly said, sometimes the mother is from a different background. The language that the father speaks is different. So you take a middle ground, which is your English, right? So in Bangalore, I know there are a lot of alumni of Takshashila also who have made enough content that helps people pick up Kannada, from Kannada Gottilla to an app to, teaching people like at least a month-long Kannada conversational kind of course. So I know that you ended up picking it up after a while because you wanted to soak yourself in a place like this, and there's more for a city when you pick up the language and have a conversation. So do you think this also plays out well? Again, Tamil Nadu, I would say, is a place where I have been, and I realized that picking up the language is more for your advantage. So I did little bit of conversational stuff. But do you think other cities also have a similar sort of a challenge? How has it been with languages? Any idea on that?
Yeah. So I've thought a lot about this, Sowmya, because especially about Bangalore's so-called welcoming nature of Bangalore's Kannadigas, which are the local population. And I thought, what if Bangaloreans came up with a pact among themselves and said, we'll be like the French or even say the Tamilians, which is where I grew up, where if somebody speaks to us in Tamil, we won't respond. We'll just say, learn Kannada, be rude to them, things like that. But then Bangalore would not be the startup capital because it is because North Indians feel welcome here. They feel they can conduct their trade, their enterprise without learning a language. So the language barrier is not there, which has made Bangalore so advantageous. It has given Bangalore many advantages, mostly economic, because people are thronging to Bangalore, unlike many cities. So I've thought a lot about this, is what has Bangalore lost by giving up or not enforcing Kannada? I grew up in Tamil Nadu in an era where Karunanidhi basically said you can't teach the children Hindi, you cannot, Tamil must be the language. Now that is no longer true in any city. Everybody learns whatever they want. German, they learn German, whatever they want. So that said, so in Bangalore, Kannada learning is a choice. It is not a compulsion. And there are Bangalore has advantages by not imposing this compulsion because it attracts an enterprise and a cosmopolitan nature in the city. What is the cost is that people get away without speaking Kannada for 30 years. I know North Indians who live here and say, I've lived here 30 years, I don't speak Kannada. So I want to tell them what do you gain by learning Kannada? Because truly in Bangalore, it's a choice. I think it completely changes the way you interact with the city. It completely opens your mind to literature, the wonderfully robust literature of Karnataka. Even I can't read, but I still listen. It allows you to engage with Bangalore in a much deeper and a profound way, I would say. So, and Kannada isn't that difficult. Like you say, Takshashila students are teaching it. There are apps for it. The best way is to keep watching these Kannada serials on TV, or watch the movies. I must have watched Mr. and Mrs. Ramachari like 100 times. You have to keep hearing the same dialogue to the point where you can memorize it, because only then will you understand the grammatic structure of the language. So it's possible. And if anyone, I'm not very facile with languages. I can't speak good Hindi, but I can speak decent Kannada.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
Yeah, I see your reference of Kantara and Yash and all of that. So it's nice that from the golden rebel stars to everybody from Mungaru Male, you've grappled with all of it. So that's nice. I mean, I think I being a Kannadiga, I would certainly be so appreciative of anybody who makes an attempt to, possibly talk. And when they're not familiar, of course, the grammar is off. But I think that's the way you get started, right? Only when you have conversations will you actually excel in that language. So, a little on a different tangent of art and all of that, from Chitrakala Parishad and Chitra Sante to a map and everything that's coming alive, right, in this city. I was actually joking with Lakshmi saying that earlier on, about 20 years back, whenever I had cousins come from Mumbai or Mangalore, Udupi, the first thing we will plan for them is they'll be like, oh, we have come to Bangalore to see Bangalore, and our next, instinctive response would be, oh, let's plan for Mysore. I'm like, okay, now when I reflect, that was an auto. But trust me, when people said we are coming to Bangalore, because this was the only place where, my dad was the first one to move from Kundapur to here. So the whole clan, the folks, anybody who wanted to further education here or picked up a job, ended up at our place. But though it was a small place, the first thing that he did, or all of us jumped into, was, oh, you've arrived today. Okay, tomorrow morning we will head to Mysore, was the thing. And Srirangapatna, and do the Tipu Sultan, all that, Mysore Palace, Maddur Vade, all of that was part of the plan. So I was just reflecting while I was reading your book that, yeah, actually, we didn't have too many things planned in Bangalore. One, Vidhana Saudha, Kabban Park, Bull Temple, some combination of this used to happen. So I was thinking, now we take them to Rangashankar, we come to BIC, we tell them little bit of Commercial Street, Jainagar, 4th block shopping, and eating, of course, is on the agenda, right? Everybody wants to try food. So that was the way it was planned. So now the city has more to offer. So maybe you should tell us a little more of how we have figured out our plan for Bangalore when people visit.
So one of the best compliments I received about this book, Sowmya, is a friend in Delhi who said, you've written a primer for Bangalore. Anybody who moves here or visits here should read this on the flight, so that, because it's a very personal essay collection about that exposes you to a new city. And it's also like a friend holding your hand and saying, Idu Namma Bangalore, you come with me, I'll show you all my spots. So in that sense, I think this book is very giftable for newcomers to Bangalore. And also, Sowmya, to go back to my earlier point about learning Kannada, only after I learned Kannada did I realize that Kundapur has a very strong culinary culture. The Kundapura masala. I didn't know that till I watched those again for the sake of mugging up Kannada. I watch continuously these cooking channels. And the way they speak about Kundapura, and there are certain specific dishes which unfortunately are non-vegetarian, so I can't eat them with the chicken and everything. But when you said Kundapura, before I learned Kannada, it would have been blank for me. But now I know you come from a pure, proud culinary culture. So there you go. That's one reason. So that's what I mean when I say it opens up not just the city, but the full state to you in ways unimaginable.
Yeah.
And now Huh?
Masal
Sorry.
dosa also. Masal dosa also.
Masala dosa also. Next time you go, I have to ask you for the masala, Kundapur masala. But your question was about the arts. Yeah, I think now Bangalore has so much to offer that it's really funny what you said about let's go to Mysore. But I can relate to it. I think early on people were at a loss what to do. Should we take them to Venkatappa Art Gallery? I've been here now close to 20 years, and I remember that sinking feeling when guests are visiting, like how do we entertain these people for
Yeah,
a few
yeah.
days. But culture is thriving, no question. Rangashankara, you go, it's packed. You come to by BIC, it's packed. But I think in order for it to get to the next level, our city needs to solve the traffic problem, because for North Bangalore people to go to Rangashankara is a nightmare. For South Bangalore people to come to this side anywhere near Hebbal is a nightmare.
Yeah.
So while the cultural outlets are overflowing, Jagriti Theatre is there near Whitefield, they are very limited to their geographical zone. And to the point where people are saying, let's start a Rangashankara in North Bangalore. So if you have to duplicate microbreweries, duplicate cultural institutions, duplicate Commercial Street and Jayanagar 4th block in order
Yeah.
to experience it, that is a really sad tale. So I
Yeah.
think if Bangalore solves its traffic, it will be unstoppable.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it was hilarious for the CET exam that my daughter did this year. She ended up in Whitefield was her center, and the like if
God.
one exam was today, the next morning she had to be there again. So we said, okay, let's book a hotel there and stay, so that you don't have to do this, okay? Because you're also the fatigue sets in, right? Just the commute can throw you off, and you never know how you can be surprised by where you can get stuck. So we said, let's keep it a little more easy, but it worked in our favor. We were laughing about it, but I know that not everybody is privileged enough to do such things, right? We need to factor all of those as well. Also, Shoba, the lake community, the kind of people who are doing, like, say, the walks and everything around it also is changing, right? It's a very community driven space. A lot of non-profits, civic leaders have taken up specific causes that they are passionate about, and I think the city truly shows how much they're concerned and they care about it, right? In a little way, when one has time, I live towards the Puttenhalli Lake, and every time I visit that place, I'm like, it's just transformed itself, right? Like, there's a walking track, it's beautifully done up, but it's also because somebody took it up and said, Usha did a lot of things with the community around, right? It speaks for what potential we have. And it's not just about, okay, let the sarkar figure it out or anything, very participative in nature. Maybe you should tell us a little more with your experience of engaging with different organizations like this, Shoba.
So, Sowmya, Bangalore has given me many gifts, but one very nice gift is that it exposed me to nature in the city. And Bangalore has a thriving, I'm on a Telegram group called Bangalore Wildlife Friends. There's close to 2,000 people in different aspects of the group. So Bangalore has a high rate of civic activism and citizen participation. And I see it in the nature communities. Saulkere, for example, BBMP wants to quote unquote beautify it. And there's a full group of people who live near Saulkere that are saying, let it be a wetland, let it not, you please don't put cement on the sides because you need a gradual slope in order for the birds to thrive. So these are people who work in corporates, take time off, engage with the government and try to make things happen. And Puttenhalli is, of course, the fantastic surprise, a success story that we all use whenever we talk about my own Alsur Lake or anything like that. But it requires a certain consistency and a certain championship from a few people at least that are hard to mobilize everywhere. In my own every area, the Malleshwaram has an RWA that is apparently very successful in the solid waste management area. So that you have these pockets where as you say, Puttenhalli, the lake is a success story. Now, going forward, I think because of the Bangalore floods last year, especially with the billionaire in boat story, all the Epsilon, Bellandur, those communities are going to mobilize and try to clean up the lake or at least work with the drainage of that. So I think it's a great city to be a young person in, because you have the youth, the optimism, the can-do attitude, and there's a constant engagement with government agencies. So if you go to Cubbon Park, there are people who will talk to the horticultural department and why are all the tree signs in English? Can we put them in Kannada? So it's continuous. It just doesn't stop. It's not like a project that starts and finishes. In Lal Bagh, Cubbon Park, I see it. It's a continuous engagement, continuous back and forth about working with government. So I don't think you can sort of be a crusader like a Robin Hood here. You have to work with the government, and Bangalore teaches you how to do that, because there is already a precedence set by institutions like Takshashila, the activist groups that work near lakes, where they are actually engaging with government and trying to come to a win-win situation for everybody. So.
Yeah. Interesting. The Malleshwaram Social actually does some really interesting work. One of our alum, Krishna Panyam, actually took us on a Malleshwaram walk last week. Just a couple of us from office went, and the wall murals and Geechugalu, the kind of artwork that's there, it helps in having such nice conversations about the place itself. And they being very thrilled that their artwork also was on the wall was quite nice to see, and how they actually alongside with people to make it happen, right? So all of that, and in fact, like the app that is, every time for any reason, if you see in Bangalore, at least people thrive on having apps for everything, right? Food you order on app, anything that you want to check on, it's on an app. So I think this app culture, to a large extent, a lot of youngsters find it very exciting. Like the people in engineering colleges, as part of their assignments itself, they do a lot of apps and they create things so that it's very handy. I think the city also allows a lot of entrepreneurs to come and test it here because it shows promise. A lot of entrepreneurs have also told me if they move out of the city, they don't see the same vibe. Like they don't see the response from the customers the way they got in Bangalore. So everybody sees promise in being an entrepreneur here, but may not be in other cities. That's what at least I've heard from friends who moved out to test it in other locations and it didn't work in their favor, kind of thing. So interesting. And also coming to the apartment culture that's there, right? Shoba, I resonate with it so much because we're a small community of about 60 apartments. And in one of the episodes, Manoj and I talk about the role of RWAs and how we see a mini India in each of our own setups, right? And we vehemently were different in our experience. While he had nasty experience in the apartment, I talked about a community where we are just an extended home. We pitch in for each other. There's a lot of small things happening, no bureaucracy, all of that. So, maybe you should tell about your own experience of, how the apartment culture has worked for you.
Yeah. Our apartment community is like yours, Sowmya. It's sort of a mini India as well. But I was thinking about this, and I've written about apartment communities in the book, and I was thinking about it as whether is it appropriate for a book called Namma Bangalore, because this apartment communities can be duplicated in most Indian metros. And then I thought, what is unusual about Bangalore that I can say that would fit into a book? And I think that at least in my apartment, if you use it as a reflection, and I think in yours as well, what is unusual about Bangalore apartment communities is that the ratio of certain communities or certain languages is more or less equal. So you go to a Chennai apartment complex, maybe 80% will be Tamil speaking and 20% will. Whereas here in my own apartment complex, if you look at the religions that people follow, the languages they speak, it's a full mix. There is Marathi as well as Kannada. There's Tamil as well as Malayalam. There is here Telugu as well as UP Hindi. So that perhaps I came up with as that perhaps is distinctive about Bangalore, because it reflects you need a certain amount of money to buy apartment complexes, and that reflects the fact that Bangalore has welcomed immigrants from all over India. There are people from Bihar, Orissa, and everywhere. So that is, having said that, let me tell you about apartment complexes. I think they're as good or as bad as the people that inhabit them. And my experience is more like yours, Sowmya, not like Manoj's. I think that you have to give people the benefit of the doubt. It's not as rosy as in your complex. I mean, it's not an extended home where we walk in. There are still infighting. Infighting happens within it, but an apartment complex is about as close we urban elites come to with civic engagement. So you may not go out there to fight for a lake, but you're stuck in your apartment complex which you live in. Engaging with your apartment community is a good way to be a good citizen. I think I engage, and I think it behooves everybody to engage, because it is civic responsibility, civic duty. It teaches you that your ideas are not it's not the only way to think. There are people who think very differently from you about the same issue. You may be thinking, oh my God, it makes so much sense to do what I think. And then you go to the other person, they think the opposite, and they are convinced in their view. So I think apartment complexes are great examples of the Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar that you talk about. And they are a microcosm. So for that reason, I think they are a great way to live.
Yeah, interesting. Because I think, again, having tech, right, like from the My Gate to every other app that you want to introduce, of course, there's a thing about privacy, which is important because people care about it, right? I mean, we should have a little bit of thought that goes into all of these things that matter. But is there a civil way to do it? And I say yes, there is a way to do it. And I'm like, so we had some very innovative ways, Shoba, where there was a particular block and few apartments which were not paying up the maintenance, and we said, okay, we're a small setup. Even if 5 people decide not to pay on time, it's a headache for somebody to sit and follow. What was done innovatively is we said we'll put up a notice inside the lift, because people do spend time inside the lift, and we will name people. So it was just put that defaulter's name will be here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names were not put. Just the signaling of it worked in our favor, that those children from these households come to play. And all the kids were joking around, it's like, people's names will come up, and it's such a shame to have their names there. And this actually built up a lot of pressure, and we got the money collected on time. And they had also said that this is just the beginning. We'll probably have a flashy board at the entrance. Okay, this was all drama, but it was just that nobody wants to be put into that spot, right? And it just worked. Names were not put. They were not told who it was. Children were just gossiping around it, but it just worked in our favor. I'm like, why not? If such innovative ways can be created to solve problems, we should encourage that also. So moving into this food zone of thriving restaurants and breweries, right?
Full
We can
masala.
from not just Taza Tindi Masala Dosa, but even a Whitefield windmills kind of a place, right? I mean, across the board, people have lists that they cautiously maintain, that I have had food here, I have to try this specific dish here. I think your book beautifully lends into those insights. So I'm not going to give away all of that information. That's for people to take a look at. But also the fitness is going parallelly, right? Shobha, every time you see an eating place, I also see next few buildings there is a fitness outfit ready. Not just
That's true. They're probably working together. It's like, you feed them, let them come to me afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. From
That's so funny.
yoga, meditation to the gym and everything else around it, right? So
Yeah.
I'm this is going together, and I feel sometimes it's a message, right? As much as I was telling in Singapore, I saw that most people are comfortable eating outside, and women probably don't have to work their heads too much into what goes into the cooking side of it, because you're rest assured the food that you eat outside is not going to mess around with your system, because the protocols are quite high in terms of hygiene and all of that. But in Bangalore,
Yes.
I think we are all so immune to kind of trying out new food and specific things from places. It has kept us moving, right? I mean, all of us indulge in food, and it's almost like become another food capital of sorts, right? So I think
Yes.
people are thriving on that front too. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I was in the Northeast, and it's so funny. Our guide there said, I was enjoying one of those king chilies, which is very spicy green chilies. He says, "Oh, if you want that, you can go to Kamanahalli, and there you'll get like the same exact packets of fresh king chilies you want. You can make it." And he was teaching me how to make a chutney. I was like, "Wow, okay." So Kamanahalli has a thriving population from Nagaland. And then down the road from my house, I was at a beauty parlor, and it was all run by Manipur citizens. And I said, "Where can I try all your bamboo shoots, pickles, and all that?" They said, "Oh, Ejipura. We have a store called Seven Sisters in Ejipura. You can get all the Northeast ingredients." So there are pockets of Bangalore where you can get Korean food and Northeast food, different parts of the world, good cheeses. So wine is a little hard in Bangalore, but we all of us here in Bangalore, I think, no matter what our tastes are, we eat and drink very well.
Yeah, of course. I think.
No, and apparently JP Nagar, there's one biryani place that all my friends are saying you have to go get it from that guy. I said, okay, I don't know his name, Sowmya, but I'll find out and pass it on to you. There's one guy there.
Okay. Please let me know. And
Yes.
also, I think on the education side also, right, Shoba, I feel a lot in the initial years. I'm talking about good 30 years back, when most of the parents only had this angle of, good English education was the criteria. Of course, your choices were like a Kannada medium versus an English medium. But this was like the, thing that people had. The closest school, you cycle or you walk it up. But that was the template that was used pretty much. But now I think it's become a totally different game changer, and there is a parallel universe working towards all the kids who are doing their +2 from different entities, like the Alan Baiju from D, I forget the name. Okay, so I don't know, some sort of machinery which is churning out people who aspire to be in different IITs and institutions that they kind of aspire to see themselves to be, right? So I feel the texture, at least in South Bangalore, from the National College, Vijaya College kind of thing, it's moving away into all of these things, and they're just thriving in every nook and corner, because again, people think that traffic is going to be a nuisance if the child has to travel a lot to get to a place to study. So how have you kind of grappled with understanding the education scene in Bangalore? How has that evolved?
100%. When I moved in, we wanted to have the kids go to NPS, then went and visited all the HSR layout branch, the Indiranagar branch, the Kormangla branch. I think if there's one pain point that unites all Bangalore parents, it's education. I think whether it's tuition, finding the right. My daughter's chemistry tutor was in Rajaji Nagar, so I remember sending her all the way from here to there. But I think what unites us is, I think most Indian parents will do anything for their kids' education. No matter what, you'll figure it out. So, and then of course there's these coaching classes that we use or send the kids to. But this is part of, I think, a larger debate, Sowmya, about whether public school education is good. And of course, you hear these snarky remarks about all the ministers who will say Kannada education is a must, are sending their children and grandchildren to English medium schools. So this is part of a larger irony, I would say. It's an ironic thing that, people say one thing and do the opposite in India, all over India, with respect to education. Bangalore, I think, is no different in that. But the difference is South Bangalore has excellent colleges. At least all my friends who are my age, who grew up in Bangalore, they went to those colleges. And only now is it becoming more Indian Institute of Science, IIT, going abroad. All of that is becoming. And of course, there's a fantastic new educational institution called Takshashila, where which is churning out a nice group of alumni. So education is a common pain point, and the people come up with creative ways of solving it, is, I guess, my takeaway.
Yeah, while we're churning out policy enthusiasts, there's a huge conversation about coffee and tea in office. So there is a cult of people who are so passionate about coffee, and I'm on the minority tea drinking community that I belong to.
But coffee in Bangalore is so huge.
Yeah, it is the coffee conference. The day that happened, I also presented about how has tea evolved into India and how the Silk Route had traces of tea trade and everything around the Boston tea party and everything around it was spoken about. But also, I think the book gives a beautiful glimpse about the fundamentals of a place. I'm only hoping other cities must be having books like this, which at least if somebody is contemplating whether to move to a city like this and want probably an unadulterated look into what you feel about the city, because I'm sure somebody talking to me, I'll always say this is such a welcoming place and I've been raised in Bangalore, so I have so much more to talk about it. But I think your book gives like a third perspective of also talking about things that are very different here, and some people might just not align with it, right? So but it talks about the what of the city, where, how, when, a little bit of where it all began, right? The Lal Bagh, the rock, and everything about the story. We also think history is not that strong, but for a place like this, we know that it has some deep-rooted history too. So I think to a large extent for me, when I visited Pune and went around walking around the place, I felt it was a little bit of a replica of Bangalore, but I've had friends who told no, Bangalore has a very different vibe to it. So that was something that I was thinking about, Shoba.
Yeah, I think Bangalore is, I think we should add the moniker historic city to Bangalore, which nobody associates it with.
Yeah, I think for a city that we both have indulged in, and there's so much promise, there's opportunity. I mean, people come here for work and people come here long term and settle down. And like you also mentioned in the book, right? People come into Bangalore and rarely leave the place. I think, the city has proven itself with stories that it's a place for everybody, right? Who cares about it. And it could be anything that excites you in terms of interest. It's a place for all. So I think wonderful talking to you about Bangalore, Shoba, and I think we went into all sorts of tangents, but we covered the ground well. So thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sowmya, and I look forward to engaging with Takshashila more in the future.
Sure. Okay, take care, Shoba. Thank you all for listening to this podcast.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.